On this episode of Old Joe's Reminiscence, when a bumbling janitor who suffers from a severe fear of heights is selected by NASA to be shot into space, what could possibly go wrong? The Reluctant Astronaut is another motion picture that I've always enjoyed, no matter how many times I've seen it. The first time I saw it was likely during a weekend afternoon television presentation in the 1970s. The Reluctant Astronaut is Don Knotts' second film try following his exit from The Andy Griffith Show. I know that many people love him, but my general feeling about Don Knotts as an actor is that he's typically way too far over the top for my personal comedic tastes. And for that reason, I usually find it difficult to sit through an entire episode of The Andy Griffith Show. If you aren't familiar with The Reluctant Astronaut, I'd suggest that you pause my review to watch that comedy first, because I'm going to be doing a bird's eye lowdown on the 1967 film next. I've read that the idea for this film came after a writing partner on Don's previous film, The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, refused to attend a writers' meeting in a tall building. Those writers got talking about what occupation would be the worst for someone who suffers from acrophobia, a fear of heights. The answer they came up with was astronaut. At that, they had the beginnings of an idea for their next film project. Based on the overall success of that previous film, Universal Pictures assigned a generous budget of $1 million for this one. When we get the film rolling, we see the credits in large print over what appears to be NASA file footage. That catchy theme was written by Vic Mizzy, who'd previously scored The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, The Addams Family, and Green Acres. A rocket blasts off toward Earth's orbit, and we cut to Don Knotts in a spacesuit reporting a smooth liftoff and going through a checklist. He is Royal Fleming, played by Don Knotts.
Jesse Donald Knotts was born in Morgantown, West Virginia on July 21, 1924. The youngest of four boys, his father died when he was 13. His mother raised the boys and ran a boarding house in Morgantown. After graduating from Morgantown High School, Knotts tried to make it as a ventriloquist in New York. He attended West Virginia University for 1 year before enlisting in the Army, entertaining troops. He ditched his ventriloquist's dummy and went back to WVU to earn a degree in theater. He got married and moved to New York, where his service buddies helped him break into showbiz. He did stand-up comedy and some radio work until he broke into television on Search for Tomorrow. He spent nearly 2 years playing several parts in the Broadway version of No Time for Sergeants. He was brought on to play the psychiatrist in the film adaptation that starred Andy Griffith. Don Knotts and Andy Griffith appeared on The Andy Griffith Show for several years beginning in 1960. Don won the Emmy for Best Supporting Actor 5 times for his role as Deputy Barney Fife. After the success of The Incredible Mr. Limpet in 1964, Don signed with Universal Pictures. After 5 years in Mayberry, Don left The Andy Griffith Show to make a series of comedic films. The first was The Ghost and Mr. Chicken in 1966, followed by The Reluctant Astronaut in '67. He completed his 5-film contract with The Shakiest Gun in the West, The Love God, and the 1971 film How to Frame a Fig. He floundered for a few years until he was cast as the new landlord Mr. Foley on Three's Company. Don partnered with Tim Conway for some slapstick Disney films, and remained busy doing voice work. Don Knotts died on February 24, 2006 at the age of 81.
When the camera pulls back, we see an audience consisting of about 8 children. Some are eating snacks and one has cotton candy. Roy turns a knob on his console to activate a red rotating light. He announces a meteorite warning, saying that small meteorites are peppering the outer skin of the capsule. Ned, played by Bert Muston in an uncredited role, has fallen asleep in a chair.
Bert Muston was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on February 8, 1884. Bert attended Exposition Park when the Pittsburgh Pirates played in the first World Series in 1903. Bert earned a civil engineering degree from the Pennsylvania Military College. While he was there, Bert played in the band and was the school's hockey team goaltender. In 1916 he decided to sell cars. He sold Oaklands for GM, Franklins, and later Mercurys and Lincolns. Bert did some stage acting and he hosted a variety show on KDKA radio when they began broadcasting. With the other things going on, Bert was still relying on automobile sales for steady income. When World War II shut down automobile manufacturing, Bert took office jobs until retirement. He moved to Tucson, where he joined a stage production of Detective Story at a local playhouse. Director William Wyler saw Bert and cast the 67-year-old in the film version of Detective Story. Bert made more than 200 screen appearances between 1951 and 1976. Bert Muston died at the age of 92 on January 28, 1977.
Roy repeatedly shouts his meteorite warning until Ned finally wakes up to toss stones at the rocket. His performance nearly finished, Roy gets to the part in his script where he passes over the Hawaiian Islands. After firing the retro rockets, he announces the time until touchdown. Mary, that little girl who needs to use the restroom, may look or sound familiar. She's Pamela Ferdin, who was in scores of shows in the 1960s and 70s. He played one of the orphans picked up by the Enterprise crew on the Star Trek episode And the Children Shall Lead. She also provided the voice of Lucy Van Pelt in some of the Charlie Brown specials. As they exit the rocket ride, Roy Fleming gets a sick look on his face. Ned explains.
You can't stand heights.
After all the kids are gone, Roy calls for Ned to assist as he descends the stairs. Roy seems to get some confidence, and he struts off like a man with a purpose. He starts flirting with Ellie, a lovely young woman who works at the snack booth. Ellie Jackson is played by Joan Freeman.
Joan Leslie Freeman was born in Iowa on August 26, 1941. She started acting as a child, appearing in a few television series in 1949. Her first film role was a small part in the 1951 production Pistol Harvest. She graduated from John Burroughs High School in Burbank in 1959. 2 years later she was cast as a regular, earning $500 a week in the ABC drama Bus Stop. In 1964, she appeared as the love interest of Elvis Presley in Roustabout. She continued to do film and television appearances until 1994. Joan Freeman is 82 years old.
Now, I don't know if she's trying to let him down easy or if she's playing hard to get. She agrees to a pity date. Roy heads back to the rocket ride with confidence. As they're loading the children aboard, Ellie shouts over to Roy that he's wanted on the telephone. It's his mother. Roy needs to get home right away. He heads off, still wearing his helmet. That's okay. Ned dons a World War I vintage aviator's cap and takes over. As Roy drives a Jeep home, still wearing that costume and the helmet, he attracts a lot of attention. Longtime character actress Marjorie Bennett is so shocked that she loses her dog in a mailbox. When he arrives home, his mother is frantic. Mrs. Fleming is played by Janette Nolan.
Janette Nolan was born on December 30, 1911 in Los Angeles. While attending Los Angeles City College, Janette made her radio debut in 1932 at the age of 20. Her performance in Omar Khayyam was on the first transcontinental broadcast from radio station KHJ. She lent her voice to many characters during the golden age of radio throughout the 1930s and 1940s. Janette's film debut came in 1948 when she played Lady Macbeth in the Orson Welles film Macbeth. She played hundreds of roles during the next 4 decades. Janette Nolan died within weeks of the release of her final film The Horse Whisperer. On June 5, 1998, Janette Nolan was 86 years old.
Something Roy's father did has her worried. She brings up an application he'd sent to NASA for Roy to be an astronaut. It seems that NASA has accepted Roy as a WB-1074. His dad is running around telling everyone about it. She laments over her failure to look into his fear of heights when he was young. Roy is tired of his father thinking he's still in the Army and ordering people around. Roy says just because he's 35 and still living at home doesn't mean he has to do everything his dad says. Just then, Buck Fleming bursts into the house, exuberant in the news that his son is going to be an astronaut. Buck Fleming is played by Arthur O'Connell.
Arthur O'Connell was born in New York City on March 29, 1908. After the death of his father when Arthur was just 2 years old, he was sent to live with an aunt. He attended St. John's College for 2 years before finding work at New York Edison. He got his stage debut in a production of The Patsy in 1929. Arthur toured in New York and London. He got some small film roles in the late 1930s. He befriended Orson Welles, who cast Arthur as a reporter in Citizen Kane. Arthur was an entertainer in the Army during World War II and he went back to the stage after the war. In the 1950s, Arthur started getting more Hollywood roles and Oscar nominations. He continued acting until Alzheimer's disease forced his retirement in 1975. Arthur O'Connell died on May 18, 1981 at the age of 73.
Roy tries to tell his father that he's not cut out to be an astronaut because of his fear of heights. We cut to Buck and his World War I buddies celebrating. The man playing the piano is Buck's buddy Rush, being played by Paul Hartman, also known from The Andy Griffith Show.
Paul Hartman was born to a showbiz family in San Francisco on March 1, 1904. He began performing with his family at an early age. He attended the University of California and then went to work as a newspaper reporter. When he discovered that he could make more money in the theater, he quit the newspaper business. In 1922 he teamed up with Grace Barrett to form a dance comedy act. They married a year later. The team debuted on Broadway in Ballyhoo with Bob Hope. They won a Tony Award for their revue Angel in the Wings. The two divorced in 1951 and Grace died in 1955 from cancer. Paul gave up the stage for television and a few films. He can still be seen in reruns of The Andy Griffith Show as handyman Emmett Clark. He continued playing Emmett Clark on 62 episodes of the spin-off series Mayberry RFD. Paul Hartman died on October 2, 1973 at the age of 69.
The bearded man is Buck's friend Plank, played by Frank McGrath.
Benjamin Frank McGrath was born in Missouri on February 2, 1903. He was a rodeo performer before getting into stunt work in Hollywood. His first film appearance as an actor was an uncredited role in the 1930 film The Big Trail. He played a few credited roles, but remained mostly uncredited until he was cast in Wagon Train. He appeared as trail cook Charlie Wooster in 271 episodes of the Western between 1957 and 1965. His last film was the Don Knotts comedy Western The Shakiest Gun in the West that released in 1968. Frank McGrath died at age 64 on May 13, 1967, a month before the Reluctant Astronaut released.
The third man, wearing a pointed World War I Pickelhaube helmet, is Bert, the town's barber. Bert is played by Guy Raymond.
Guy Raymond was born Raymond W. Geyer on July 1, 1911. He started performing at Chin Lee's restaurant in New York City at the age of 15. He danced professionally for 14 years, often as part of the Shay and Raymond duo. He made the switch from dancing to acting in 1954. He did both film and television performances. Star Trek fans will recognize him as the space station trader in The Trouble with Tribbles. Guy Raymond died at the age of 85 on January 26, 1997.
Roy comes out dressed in a suit that Don Knotts had worn on the Andy Griffith Show. He tries to sneak out of the house, but his dad catches him. Roy tells them he's got a date with Ellie Jackson, whom they refer to as the hot dog girl. Bert suggests that Roy should have come by the shop for a haircut. Roy says he'd better get going, and they all salute him before he heads out. Roy shows up just as Ellie's closing up their shop. She'd forgotten her date with Roy. She makes an excuse about having to rush home because her mother has the flu. Yeah, right. He tries to tell her about his recruitment to be an astronaut, but she's in a hurry. She hops in her VW and says that Roy can tell her about it tomorrow. The next day, everyone is at the airport to see Roy off. Both his mother and his father ask him if he's got his ticket, to which he taps his jacket pocket and says he's got it right there. Rush asks him too. The ticket clerk, played by the often uncredited Don Ross, asks for Roy's ticket. With Roy's fear of heights, I can just imagine that this will end badly. Just then, Ellie shows up. Maybe she does care for him. We hear the 15-year-old Douglas DC-3 fire up an engine as Roy approaches the plane. As the plane climbs away, it's revealed that Roy is hiding in some bushes beside the runway. He takes a Greyhound bus to Houston instead. When Roy arrives, those exterior shots were filmed on location at the Johnson Space Center complex southeast of Houston. A car pulls up and the driver offers Roy a lift. The man introduces himself as Fred Gifford. Air Force Major Fred Gifford is played by Leslie Nielsen.
Leslie William Nielsen was born in Regina, Saskatchewan on February 11, 1926. He graduated from Victoria Composite High School in Edmonton, Alberta at age 17. He enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force to escape abuse from his father. After his discharge at the end of World War II, Leslie worked at a Calgary radio station. He studied at the Academy of Radio Arts in Toronto before a scholarship took him to New York. He studied theater and music at the neighborhood playhouse and he performed in summer stock. In the 1950s, Leslie found work on television. His first film was the 1956 drama The Vagabond King. His next film, Forbidden Planet, led to a multi-year contract with MGM. Once his contract was up, he was available to any studio. He was cast as American Revolutionary War hero Francis Marion in Disney's Swamp Fox series. He was popular in television westerns and other dramas. In 1972 he played the captain of the stricken ship in the Poseidon Adventure. After appearing in so many dramatic roles, it was difficult to accept him as a comedic actor. His appearance as Dr. Rumack in the 1980 film Airplane would change Leslie Nielsen forever. He went on to play Frank Drebin in the failed television show Police Squad and the 3 sequel films. He played nothing but comedic roles during the remainder of his career. Leslie Nielsen died at the age of 84 on November 28, 2010.
Realizing that Leslie Nielsen started out playing serious roles like Francis Marion in Walt Disney's The Swamp Fox doesn't mean that I won't constantly expect him to pull a Frank Drebin prank. In this film, he plays a straight man to the zaniness happening around him. The rear projection scene is almost comical in itself. When he drops Roy off, we notice that Major Gifford is driving a 1963 Mercedes-Benz 230 SL convertible. I was always under the impression that most of the Apollo astronauts drove Corvettes, so I did a little digging into that. That all started when Alan Shepard became the first American in space in 1961. He was presented with a white 1962 Corvette by GM President Ed Cole. A Florida Chevy dealer then negotiated a $1 per year lease agreement for Shepard's fellow Mercury astronauts. Discounted leases continued through the Gemini and Apollo programs until about 1971. I guess Major Gifford preferred the Mercedes. Hey, if you can afford it. When Roy gets to the personnel office, they are closed for lunch. Roy walks around the campus until he locates a cafeteria. He orders coffee, unsure what astronauts can eat. The waitress is played by Cecile Cabot. She also appeared in Dawn's The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. The look she gives when Roy orders is simply fabulous. An announcement comes over the public address system that all astronauts are to report to Building 9G. Roy, assuming that announcement included him, gets up to leave. The waitress brings his coffee. He takes a gulp, pays, and asks directions to Building 9G. Inside Building 9G, he sees a door marked with a flashing red light. He looks through the glass and sees a centrifuge in operation. A strap on his satchel gets caught on the door handle and opens the door. Things go flying as he struggles to close it again. Following his debris field down the hall, Roy ends up in an office where a secretary, played by Faye DeWitt, hands him his shorts and directs him to the personnel office. Roy is paged to the desk. A man named Donnelly comes out to meet him. Donnelly is played by the lonely Maytag repairman Jesse White.
Jesse White was born Jesse Weidenfeld on January 3, 1917 in Buffalo, New York. He was raised in Akron, Ohio, where he made his first stage appearance at age 15. He worked as a salesman and tried his hand at vaudeville and burlesque. He made his Broadway debut in The Moon is Down in 1942. That led to a part in the popular stage play Harvey. He later reprised the role in film and on TV. In 1947, White was offered a small part in Kiss of Death for his film debut. He appeared in screwball comedies like Pajama Party and The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini. Jesse is probably best remembered as the lonely Maytag repairman from the long-running ad campaign. Jesse White died on January 9, 1997.
When Roy sees a man testing a jetpack, he remarks that he'd never be able to do that. Donnelly assigns a locker and hands Roy a broom. Then he assigns tasks for Roy on his new job. Roy asks if he's a janitor. Roy starts laughing about it until he realizes what it will mean to his father. He finds a payphone to call home. Major Gifford notices Roy in his maintenance uniform and he asks him about it. They walk along as Roy tells the story about how his father got him the job, thinking he'd be an astronaut. Roy is still talking and walking when the Major joins the other astronauts for a group photo. Roy decides to try on a space helmet. He's admiring himself in a mirror when Donnelly walks in. When Roy opens his mail, it's a copy of the Sweetwater Messenger.
Oh, this has just gone too far.
After Roy leaves, Gifford decides to take a look at what has caused all that excitement. Roy had wired ahead to say that he was coming, so his father was ready to meet him at the door. Roy tries desperately to tell his pa about the mix-up, but the man keeps interrupting Roy. Melissa Gilbert of Little House on the Prairie fame made her acting debut in this film. They all get together for a group photo. This is the first of several scenes featuring a running gag about Rush and his misfiring camera flash. They bring out a cake that's shaped like a space capsule. Rush attempts another picture of Roy cutting the cake. Then a group of Roy's nieces sing a song they wrote for him. He sure has a lot of nieces for a guy who's an only son. Roy cuts the cake in half, and then actress Cecile Elliott pushes her way through the crowd, claiming that her dog Pingo wants to see the cake. Pingo loves cake. Buck suggests that they probably have a lot of technical equipment, and Roy starts to brag. An obnoxious kid asks a technical question. Roy evades the question with a vague answer. Bert wants to know what they charge for a haircut at the Space Center. The kid proclaims Roy to be a phony. Ellie suggests that they dance. Roy would rather go someplace private with Ellie. And when we hear what Buck has chosen to play, I don't think there'd be much dancing going on to that. Roy and Ellie sit on a bench in the backyard. And when it looks as if Roy is going to try to kiss Ellie, she exclaims, "Oh, look, a tire swing." She has Roy push her really hard. He's distracted by someone calling his name. She sure sends mixed signals. When Roy comes inside, he tells his dad that he's going to quit the astronaut program, and that leads to a confession. Buck wasn't in the war. He was a librarian at Fort Dix. Roy tells his father not to worry, he'll work it out. At the airport, waiting for Roy's return flight to Houston, Mrs. Fleming asks about Roy and Ellie. "We're just friends, Ma." Ellie rushes from work to give Roy a Raggedy Ann doll to take into space with him. He says his goodbyes and he gets a kiss from Ellie. "We're just good friends, Ma." It's the same footage of the DC-3 taking off, and then Roy's back in the bushes again. When he gets on the bus, the driver, played by character actor Paul Breyer, takes a look at the doll and quips, "Running away from home?" It's a week later, and Roy is assigned to wax the floors in the Monitor Control Center. That's when he sees his pa, Rush, and Plank crossing the complex. Roy rushes off. He puts on a spacesuit. Plank wants a picture, but the flash fails, of course. Roy enters wearing Fred Gifford's suit. He says his suit is at the cleaners. He begins to give them a tour, pointing out the clean floor. They have Roy get inside the environment simulator for a picture. This time the flash pops, surprising all of them. Roy asks them to try to open the hatch. He eventually puts his fist through the glass and he rips the seat out of Gifford's spacesuit. Next, they see a rocket sled. Roy gets in it and puts his helmet on for a picture. Then he goes through the launch procedure and ends up going for a quick ride. Roy eventually ejects. It's funny how the fire equipment brings Buck and all of Buck's friends out with them. Donnelly's there too. He seems surprised to see that it's Roy. But if he didn't know that it was Roy out there, what was his motivation for going there? Donnelly fires Roy, telling him to pick up his check in the morning. I guess some states require that. I heard that in, I think it was California, they had to hand you your final paycheck at the moment they terminated you. Here in Pennsylvania, you get paid at your normal payday. But I digress. Buck tells his friends that he'll meet them at the gate. He has to go back and find his hat. It's a somber parting as Buck heads home. As Roy's leaving the complex, a couple of limos with motorcycle escorts arrive. It's so subtle that in all the times I've seen the film, this is the first time I've noticed that. Fittingly, Roy finds himself at the Blast-Off bar, where the bar patrons seem to have some sort of a drinking game that involves chugging a shot and a beer. They pull Roy in to participate. Meanwhile, back at the Johnson Space Center, Cervantes, played by Robert F. Simon, is conducting a late meeting. Major Gifford's mission was scheduled for July, but intelligence reports that Russians are going to beat them. They are sending up a dentist who is neither an aviator nor an astronaut. NASA can have a vehicle ready to launch and beat the Russians by 12 hours, but they need someone to put in it. The Major and a guy named Charlie, played by Mickey Finn, go out looking for Roy Fleming. Meanwhile, Roy is getting drunk and making eyes at a 40-something woman played by Joan Shawley. When Roy orders another beer, the barkeep slides it to him, knocking him back into the arms of Major Gifford and Charlie. They tell Roy that they want to send him up in the eclipse. He's being examined by Dr. Lowe, played by Nelson Olmsted, and Dr. Bussert, played by Herb Vigran, who I recognize from his numerous appearances. They take a jeep ride out to a waiting Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star two-seater for the flight to the Cape. After liftoff, Gifford finds himself without a backseater. I don't think I'll ever figure out how Roy could get out of riding in the T-33, especially with an airman holding the ladder for him. The bus driver this time is played by Fabian Dean, who I recognize from an episode of Get Smart. It's T-minus 14 minutes and counting, and Roy isn't there yet. He's in the bushes staring up at the rocket. He wants to run away. In fact, he is running away when the voices in his head, his conscience, convinces him to go through with it. Some men in a station wagon come out to get him. As with the Johnson Space Center, the exterior shots of the Kennedy Space Center were filmed on location at the Cape, with file footage spliced in. At T-minus 8 minutes, Roy is on his way to the gantry. As the technicians are strapping Roy in, he recounts a humorous story from his childhood, explaining why he's afraid of heights. Roy releases his restraints as they pull back the access bridge. He opens the hatch and steps out, only to find himself hanging from that hatch hundreds of feet up in the air. He somehow manages to climb back in and latch the door just as they start ignition. He struggles to his chair, but he's not strapped in. Roy panics at the jolt of the first stage separation. Major Gifford warns him ahead of the second stage. Meanwhile, back in Sweetwater, Buck is watching a war movie on television. The newscaster, played by Jerry Dunphy, reports the launch, and Buck is ecstatic. Mrs. Fleming simply faints on the couch. As Mrs. Fleming starts to come to, Jerry Dunphy repeats the news, and she's out once again. Meanwhile, Roy is floating around weightless, having removed those restraints. He begins to spin out of control. He grabs a lever and pulls it. They did a rather poor job of hiding the wires that are holding Don Knotts up in the air in this scene, and when he lets go of the Raggedy Ann doll, its movements aren't very natural either. As Roy tries to get back in his seat, his feet knock an open reel tape out of whack. Everyone in Sweetwater is gathered to watch. Buck is convinced that Roy only lied to him to keep the mission a secret. Mission Control wants Roy to try an eating experiment. There are crackers in a compartment beside his seat. They all come floating out as soon as he opens the container. There's also a plastic tube of peanut butter, and all it takes is one gentle squeeze, and a 3-foot string of peanut butters floating and dancing around Roy's head. Well, those crackers and peanut butter are floating around Roy. What else could go wrong? The computer tape starts unraveling from its spool. Major Gifford asks Roy to carefully put the tape back on the reels. The gang back at Sweetwater gasps in unison when they hear about the computer problem. This time it's Ellie's turn to faint when she hears that Roy may have to stay up there. And back home, Mrs. Fleming is out cold too. Roy eventually gets the tape back on its reels. Fred tells him that without the programming tape, he won't be coming down again. Roy's medical telemetry shows emergency readings at that. Fred tells Roy to look out the window. The Major is going to try to talk Roy down. He mentions one of the Hawaiian Islands before Roy kicks something and he shorts out the comms link. They can hear Roy, but he can't hear them. He says that he just saw Hawaii, and then it starts to hit him. When he sees the retro rocket switch at his side, it all comes together. He starts to recite his script from the rocket ride back at Kittyland. Roy fires the retro rockets and starts bringing the capsule down. On board the carrier, everyone is on deck. From the brass to the sailors and the Marines, they're all looking out to sea for Roy's splashdown. Then the capsule lands right there on deck with a thud. Roy opens the hatch, deploys his life raft, and crawls out with a paddle. Only the cheering crowd brings him to realize that he's landed on the carrier, not in the water. He's greeted by Captain Ferguson, played by Bill Quinn. He says that after a quick medical debrief, a jet fighter will have Roy back home in 15 minutes. We cut to Roy and Ellie, newlyweds, heading to catch a plane to their honeymoon destination. We see that same footage of the DC-3 taking off, and there's Roy hiding in the bushes. Don Knotts breaks the fourth wall to say, The Reluctant Astronaut is such an enjoyable, fun movie. There are times when it borders on too much silliness, but overall it's not too bad. I have to wonder where Ellie went for her honeymoon without Roy. And how can they afford to buy so many airplane tickets that aren't even used? As fate would have it, The Reluctant Astronaut debuted just days before the January 26, 1967 fatal fire which destroyed the Apollo 1 capsule. That fire killed the crew of 3, command pilot Gus Grissom, senior pilot Ed White, and pilot Roger Chaffee. Many blame that tragic event for the low revenue returned from this comedic motion picture. It only brought in $1.5 million at the box office on a $1 million filming budget. The film features a race against the Soviets to be the first to put a civilian into space. They had actually beat us to that point back in 1963. They put the first civilian, as well as the first woman, into space when the Soviet Union launched the Vostok 6 space capsule with Valentina Tereshkova aboard. She did 48 orbits, spending 71 hours in space. That's more time in space than all of the U.S. astronauts combined at the time of this film. The Russians were regularly whooping our butts in the space race. And that's why we had to put a man on the moon when we did. We would eventually work together. In the 1990s, our shuttles visited the Russian Mir space station. Cosmonauts flew on our shuttles, and Americans launched aboard the Soyuz spacecraft. They were learning from each other and building trust between the nations. So we got a lighthearted space movie review and a little bit of a history lesson, all in one video. Which brings me to what to review next. I've been seeing a lot of clips from the Andromeda strain in my feed lately. Maybe it's a sign. I'll probably review that film next, if I can find a better quality video than my old VHS tape that I recorded off TV years ago. Until then, remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Remember, if you activate the notification bell, you'll be informed when I post my next episode of Old Joe's Reminiscence.